Hello and welcome back. This is once again Voices in the Dark and my little series where I interview my friends about geeky topics that they're passionate about. Today we have Min, which I haven't seen. I haven't seen you in so long, sir.
Me too. It feels like it's been almost 7-8 months since we last met up.
Yeah, it must be, right?
Yeah, it was before the whole world kind of suddenly stopped.
Was it this year? Did we meet this
I
year?
don't even know.
Oh, we might have met to like exchange a hard drive or something.
Yeah. Like I think the last video that you filmed with Rex.
Yes.
So it would have been probably before December. So
Yeah.
we haven't. Good to see you.
Good.
It's been a while.
I'm gonna pour you a drink.
Sure.
You decided that we shouldn't get too drunk.
Yep.
So we have a cider.
Yep. Cider works. Thank you. Go for it.
Apparently it's a Kiwi Cider from New Zealand.
Ah, okay. I haven't had this
is
before, so
one of my home places.
perfect. It's always good to try new ciders.
And I got pineapple and raspberry. I was gonna get a range of different ones, but the box was half the price than the single one, so I was like,
Works fine for me.
hopefully it's not too disgusting.
See, I find that ciders rarely like bad. I don't think I've ever had any cider that I didn't like.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this could be a first.
We'll see one of the facial expressions in 4K.
Cheers.
Cheers, sir.
Cheers. Oh, that's good. That's really good.
Pineapple and raspberry.
Okay.
There's a few other ones that are interesting in that range, so have a look.
Noted.
Yes, took me too long.
Yeah.
Too
Well,
long.
we're here now. So, what shall we discuss?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to kind of say that it's such a pleasure to have you here. During lockdown, one of the things I realized is the people that I truly care about, just because I was thinking about them.
That's
And
quite
I
nice.
hope they're well. I hope he's doing well. And I missed your energy in my life. And I was like, I gotta find a way to get him in here.
Same here. Like every once in a while, like when I'm going through and clearing out some old footage or trying to save up some space on a hard drive, I come across like some footage that you shot or that we worked on, and I'm like, I wonder how Dre is. And then like within a couple of hours, I get a text from you, and I'm like, it's like he's psychic. So it's good to see you.
Definitely good. So I mean, you've seen a couple, or maybe just a few minutes, because you're a very busy man these days.
I've seen a couple of the episodes. Not, I don't think I've seen one fully because there's always like a distraction that pops up that I'm like, I'll just deal with it, and then it becomes a thing that you end up spending 3-4 hours.
The life of the freelancer.
Well,
At
yeah.
least not freelancer anymore, but still.
Kind of.
I think the
like,
workflow is similar.
borderline. Like I think I like to continue to think that I'm still a freelancer at heart. But yeah, so I've seen a couple of the episodes, and like I love the feel of them, and sometimes they're really in-depth conversations you have about really interesting subjects, whether it's like film or creativity or just like nerding out on some really cool things.
Because I had this idea that, to have a good, because to me a podcast is a conversation worth having that other people might like to have, but they don't have someone to talk about it with. That was what attracted me to the first place, to this format. But then I started thinking about conversations I want to hear, because I think I was trying to make ones for other people. I'm like, this is not working.
Yeah.
What do I want to say? And then if other people want to watch it, great. Otherwise, they can go by themselves.
Well, I think that's the best way to create content, right? So
Yeah.
you want to make the things that you would want to see. And I think, especially with a lot of freelancers, there's a lot of effort in trying to please the client, and so we tend to forget about what we want to do. And so that tends to be a lot of things that people relate to. And so there's going to be people who might not like what you're into, but there's going to be a lot of people who are. So I think you've got to try and focus on doing what's right for you. And I love the fact that that's what you've centered a lot of your video work around.
Yeah. And passion is contagious. And so today I want to talk to you about storytelling, because it's something you're very passionate about.
Yeah. I like to think so.
It's more of a broader topic than the ones I did in the past with some of my other friends, because there was a specific thing that they were geeky about that I thought I'd interview them. But I wanted to do this first with you before delving in any specific detail, because storytelling is an important part of your life. So I just wanted to ask the first question, which is, what drew you to storytelling in the first place? Like, was there a moment when you thought this is amazing? Did you grow up with a history of like telling stories with or?
Well, that's a really great question, because for me, I think I've always been a storyteller, even as a kid. Because I grew up watching a lot of films. Me and my siblings learned to speak English from watching so many films that even when I was in school in Ethiopia, me and my siblings spoke better English than most of our teachers, because we just like loved these incredible stories that were full of like imagination, action, and so it was something that was very deep and close to my heart. And so as a kid, I think I was always a bit of an extrovert. I was always the one who, like, whenever there was a poem that somebody wrote, I'd be the one to like perform in front of the class if the person who wrote it was feeling quite shy, or if there was something that I'd seen on a movie, like I'd be the one like just fooling around and trying to recreate that scene in front of friends and family whenever they came over. So I think that was just something that was always a thing I did. And then over like my teenage years, I started to go into doing a lot of drama in schools, because when I came to the UK, that was a thing that I didn't know was a thing you could do. Like the drama courses weren't
probably less encouraged in Ethiopia.
Yeah, I wouldn't say less encouraged. I think they just weren't a thing, right? Yeah. So at the time, it wasn't part of like the curriculum. Right. So
Italy is the same. When I moved to New Zealand, drama was a subject, whereas in Italy, it wasn't.
It's not a thing, right? And so when I came to the UK and realized, I was like, I could do acting. And you mean like that's a thing I could get a grade for? And so I kind of jumped heavily into that, because I realized that I just really enjoyed these characters, right? Because there was a different person that I could become for a short period of time, and I could kind of just switch my brain off and become that person or become that character, and I loved seeing people's reactions to, you know, how these characters behave, and whether it made them laugh or whether it made them kind of genuinely believe that this was not me, this was like a person that they think is real, you know, even if it's like for 5 minutes. It was something that I kind of really fell in love with. And so then over time, I think that evolved into looking at all different types of storytelling. So from acting, I went into starting to do film and art and design and all of these different other elements. So I think it really stemmed from watching a lot of films as a kid. Yeah. Okay. And that's kind of where it started.
So there's always a strong direction for you.
Yeah. I didn't know like that storytelling was a thing. Like to me, it was just a thing I did. Yeah. Like it was something that I hadn't really pinned down. So I think it's more in my more recent years that I've kind of realized, I'm like, wait, I'm a storyteller. Yeah. Like this is a thing that I do as part of my life.
We don't necessarily see the link between all those things you described at the beginning, that they have this kind of idea in common, which is telling stories, which is such a primal part of the human experience.
Absolutely. Because if you think about it, right, storytelling is one of the oldest methods of communication in history, right? Yeah. Because if you look at cave paintings, right, that's very likely where people gathered, or somebody had a story that they needed to communicate, or something that was a visual representation of a thing that happened that someone saw, right? So storytelling has been one of the most important elements of human culture, and you know,
transmitting knowledge across generations without writing, before writing. Because it's so important.
A story is the best method in which to deliver information. Yeah. Because it encapsulates everything you need, so it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in that story, when you tell someone, you give them a package of information. And because of that structure, it's easy for that person to take that information and pass it on to another person, because it's very simple and clear. But if you just gave the person just the bits of information,
it's not the same.
They don't remember it, because it's not a package that's easy to contain.
I think it's because to truly take a message on board, you need to make someone feel something, not think. Because they can know it logically, but until they feel that emotion associated with that thing, it's not the same. And I learned this the hard way. You know, I was so as a kid, for me, it was books. And I love reading books and reading stories. And when I got older and I wanted to improve myself, I read books on how to improve yourself and that type of thing. But you know what? It was ultimately watching certain TV series and certain movies when I finally got like things that I've been trying to learn from books. You know, like proper certain types of human empathy, or understanding why my parents acted in a certain way with me as a kid. Like understanding, oh, they were just trying to protect me, and I understand that emotionally, not just like why are they being so strict? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think for me, like books were a thing that I just couldn't wrap my head around. Like I don't think I ever sat still long enough to finish a book properly when I was a kid. And there were a few books here and there, but I can see how, like, for you, that could be a completely different experience, right? And
that was my first encounter with story. Obviously I liked movies, but a book I could read anytime, anywhere. I could take it with me. Yeah. And there was just certain ones that opened up worlds and ideas to me that I didn't have access to. So that was my route into loving stories came originally from books.
But I guess also, like, with books, you have your own version of it, right? Like when you read a book, you imagine things a certain way. Like two people can read a book and have two completely different visual representations in their head, which is why I think, like, when there's a lot of films that get made from books, there's so many people who are like, it's not like the book. Like everyone's so passionate about it. And even I felt that sometimes, where there's some books that I've read, like as an adult, that I look at the films and I'm like, this is nothing like what the books make you feel like.
And there are certain things people get upset about that are stupid, you know, like the whole, I mean, this wasn't a book, but when they were thinking potentially of casting a black Spider-Man, you know, he's not black in the comic book. Like, I don't give a shit about that. But is it still a nerdy kid who's insecure dealing, like, that's the good part. That's the part you don't change from the story. It's when they change those details that I get angry. Like Game of Thrones, they threw away, for just one example, many things they did wrong, especially last season. But they threw away Jaime Lannister's character development. He was growing, you know, like learning to move away from his sister, becoming his own man, like thinking for himself, you know, regaining his honor. And they're like, oh no, but then he changed his mind.
See, that was one of the things that, like, it didn't. I hadn't read the books, but you kind of get a feel for that near the ending, and then all of a sudden. Spoiler alert. Like, and all of a sudden when he goes back, you're like, wait,
okay,
what? What just happened? And that's such a very interesting concept, right?
Like, because I mean, you're telling an arc, and there is merit to occasionally throwing expectations like under the bus to do something new. But when I think they got tripped up in that mentality of, oh, we gotta make people go, what? Every 10 seconds. And we humans respond to basic character growth and arcs. Like, you can't fuck it up every single time. You lose interest. You lose the person. They want to see the hero succeed or fail, but, you know, accept the less. Like, there's gotta be a journey. Yeah. If you just cross out the journey at the end, like it never happened. I'm like, what did I watch for 8 years?
See, that I felt that way with so many, like, TV series and shows. Like, I think that's harder to get wrong in films because you have such a short period of time and you have to focus on what's the most important element. Like, but with TV series, I think, because sometimes they go on for so long, that a lot of producers or a lot of studios feel like they have to do a big thing to get viewers, and not necessarily focusing on, like, what's the right thing for the character? What is it that that's helped them grow? And I think the best example of this has been in Breaking Bad, because if you go back and watch the first episode or the first season of Breaking Bad, you see a completely different Walter White. Yeah. And you almost look at the character and go, wow, like, there's no way that this person becomes...
if you put them next to each other, you'd be like,
I don't get it. They're two different people, right? And that's a testament to the storytelling in that series, because they show all these little steps that when you're seeing them happen, you don't really recognize them as building towards this big thing that the character becomes, right? Because in the moment, just like life, in the moment that you experience these little things, you kind of just deal with them. You kind of go, oh, it's a thing, and you get over it and you move on. But when you look back 10 years down the line, you see the culmination of all those little steps and little elements that led you to who you are. And that's why I think like that's a really great example of incredible storytelling and focus on the character.
And it's amazing because Breaking Bad is one of the few examples where the journey wasn't planned ahead of time. Because what TV series struggle with is that they're not based necessarily on a series of books or an idea that's completely finished that they have to follow. They kind of go along and see what the audience likes and doesn't, and they kind of try to follow it. And that makes it hard to get it right. But they were able to not plan too far in advance. I mean, Jesse was meant to die the first season.
Yeah.
But still be able to get to the end and make you feel like someone had thought about it all the way to the end before putting it out.
Yeah. There's two shots in Breaking Bad that are just mind-blowing. Like, and I don't think that a lot of people registered them, but to me, I remember like watching the episodes again and again and having the same feeling every time it got to those shots. The first one was when Walter White is looking for the money that he stashed in the house, and he put it
underneath the house, right?
Yeah, underneath the house, and he's in the little like hole that he hid it in, and he's found out like it's gone.
Yeah.
And the camera starts to pull up directly from him, and you see him just kind of feel squished in this area.
Yeah.
And I just remember feeling like that was such an incredible image of a character. And then the second one was of Jesse when he was driving away at the end.
Right at the end.
Yeah, when he's crying and like, but he's happy.
That was perfectly acted as well. Like you feel someone who's broken and yet there's a glimmer of hope that's relighting.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
I got goosebumps just.
Yeah, but that second moment wouldn't have happened had they not kind of been able to change the direction, right? So I think it's important that a lot of filmmakers, a lot of storytellers have a vision, but don't kind of limit it based on what you think you should totally do. And I think it's important to revisit the story every once in a while and kind of go, hey, what is the right thing? Is this something that we're passionate about? Is this something we're surprised by? And being ready to change, but not changing because you think it's just going to please the largest number of audiences. And I don't think you should do that.
No.
I think you should do it because if you think it's the right thing to do and you think it's the right development for that character.
Right. And I think, especially with film or TV, that as you see an actor deliver the performance and kind of make it real, like you have to adapt. Because you see, like it's one thing to think about it in advance, but you notice how someone interprets that and delivers it, and right away you go, oh, this man would do this next, not this. And so it's an iterative process.
Yeah.
As you kind of like we're talking about, sort of getting the statue out of the block of marble.
Yeah.
And that's how you should approach any art. I think as a kid I struggled with, especially with drawing. I wanted to get the lines perfectly right away. And my mom was trying to teach me to kind of, like you do a couple of curves and then you like fix that, you erase this and this. No. I wanted to get it right first time.
It's an evolution. I think you described it perfectly with the kind of chiseling away out of this one block of material or ice or whatever it is that you're sculpting. And one of the biggest things that a lot of people ask me is like, hey, where do I start? Like, I want to make a film, or I want to take really great images, or I want to draw. And the biggest thing I always recommend to people is just start. Like, it doesn't matter where you start, because the likely chances along that journey, you're going to change what you did at the beginning anyway. So if you're worried about taking that right first step, you're probably not going to take that first step. So it's important to just jump in and just get started. And no matter how crap or terrible it looks at the beginning, that's okay, because that's your first step. And so that teaches you to take the second step. And I kind of feel that way, especially when I'm editing a story, right? I've got a ton of footage that I need to get started with. And sometimes the footage may not have like a proper narrative to it, because it could be an event that I've just filmed and there's all these different little elements that have taken place. And so my usual approach to it is just grab a clip, whatever it is, and put it in the timeline, and take the second clip and put it in the timeline, and just start working.
Yeah.
Because once there's things there, you can start to change and move things around. But if there's nothing there and you're spending a lot of time trying to figure out, where do I start, what do I pick, then you're losing the valuable time that you need later down the line, which is, hey, how do I refine this? How do I make someone feel a certain way?
Yeah.
Now, there's lots of different ways to approach creating and telling a story. Some people like to really plan it out. But for me, it's just, I like the organic element. I like things that evolve and that start from just like scribbles to becoming a narrative or a visual thing that someone can relate to.
I really resonated with that when you explained your process to me, especially when I saw you doing it from like 300 hours of footage that made no sense and had no narrative, and you're like, oh, let's get there, and you managed to pull something out of that.
Yeah. And
kind of realizing just how play is probably the best way to arrive at something. Like, fiddle with it. You can always check it out. If it doesn't work, check it out. But if you start throwing things in, like tasting the stew, and you're like, it needs more of this, needs less of that.
I think we've lost, or we lose, the sense of play. I think that's such an important word when it comes to any creative field, right? So whether you're a photographer, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're an artist, you're a chef, whatever your creative medium be, I think in a world where there's a million YouTube videos that tell you the 10 best ways to do this, or the 10 wrong things to avoid.
Yeah.
I think we feel like there's a structure that we have to follow to learn, right? To be a filmmaker, you have to go to film school, or you have to do all these right things. And I think we're quite lucky in the sense we're at a time where those structures are also present, but also being thrown out the window. What I mean by that is, like, when you see on these YouTube videos, if you're starting out, you feel like you have to follow those steps.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have the option to be able to be like, you know what, I don't have to spend £15,000 on a gear to be able to make a video. You can use your phone.
Yeah.
You can use, a camera for £200 that has like some incredible features that allows you to film in 4K.
Yeah.
That you can just go out and play and be creative with. And so I think you don't have to feel like there's a structure that you have to follow when it comes to creativity. And I think the best stuff comes out from when you play. Yeah. One thing that I always like to do whenever I'm filming a story or a project is we'll go for the takes that we want, that have the script in a specific way, and we want to get like the actors or whoever's saying those lines to deliver it the way that the client wants initially. Then we'll have maybe 1 or 2 more takes and say, cool, you have absolute freedom, do what you want, right? And usually that's when you get some of the best takes. Yeah. Some of the best elements that you weren't expecting for, because you've given the other person room for freedom and play and creativity. You don't always get it, but when you do, it makes a huge difference. And I think it's important to play and have fun, and like creativity should be fun.
I mean, it's the only way to make things second nature.
Mm-hmm.
I must have watched a million videos on how to do lighting, trying to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
But having to fiddle, like putting myself in situations where I had to figure it out for a client like multiple times, and every time trying to do it slightly differently. Just like even now, like this setup here, it's, I don't know, the 200th iteration of how I've set it up.
Yeah.
And even though I got it looking pretty good for my last one that I did, I was like, I'm still good. Like, I don't know if this is the best, so I'm gonna try something slightly different. If it's worse than the one before, I'll go back to that one. But if not, then I made an improvement. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the phrase that you mentioned about it becoming instinctive, right? It's through the motions that you go through. And for example, like my cameras, I've used, for example, my A7 III. Now, the first time I got it, it took me about a month and a half to get used to the controls and like where things are. And I don't read manuals. Like I never went through any YouTube tutorials.
Definitely not a Sony manual. Those are not fun to read.
No, like even the menu systems aren't fun to navigate, let alone the manual. But having said that, like I just wanted to get out and play with it.
Yeah.
The day that I arrived, every time I get a camera, within an hour of taking it out of the box, I have to be outside. I have to go with it. And I have to take some pictures. I have to just fiddle with the settings to see like what each thing does. And then the more I play with it, the more comfortable I get with it. Because when it comes to using it for a client, I don't want to be trying to figure things out at that point. No. I want to know exactly how it's going to work and how it's going to behave.
Yeah.
And if I spend that time playing, then I can deliver for my client and I can say, I know exactly what I'm going to get for you. And I can spend the time getting exactly what their vision is. And then I'll spend a little bit more time just having a bit of play in sense of creativity, not as to how the camera works. And then those tend to be the things that the client really kind of goes, oh, these are incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm glad I spent that time. Mm-hmm. But it's important to play. It's important to spend the time to get familiar with your tools, to experiment and figure out how things work, because that's when you know how to fix things that go wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when you're in a very high pressure scenario, you don't want to be thinking like, why is that happening? Like you want to know why that's happening because you've spent the time and you've experienced those like little things in an environment where there is no pressure or it doesn't matter, right?
As much as possible. Funny enough, I'd prefer in my day-to-day life to collaborate with people such as yourself. That's what I want for the future. But having not had that whilst things breaking down, trying to act in the moment, figuring out like whether it's a way to fix it or a way to get over it, has made me good enough to collaborate with someone like yourself. Like thinking about how I used to be, like that guy needed a lot of help, but having it's funny. I think you need both. Having no one to rely on other than yourself is an important step, and then you should try and like not do that anymore. Look for others that are like you to work together, because you can do so much more together.
Yeah. See, I think you hold me in higher esteem than I think you should, because I think you've done some incredible work yourself, and I think everyone, when it comes to creativity, has their own path to go through, and I think we all have the person that we kind of look up to and kind of go, oh my god, their work is amazing, and then we don't really take stock of what we do. And quite a lot of times, you know, I see the footage that you share and post out, and I'm like, God, I want to be like Dre. Like, so
that's good. But that's good. Like I want to be around people that I admire, and I hope that they would admire me too, because otherwise then I'm just the dead weight if I'm not like
no, well, again, like I think that's a very healthy attitude to have, because I think learn from everyone around you. And for me, when I first started getting into photography and filmmaking, I tried to spend as much time around other people whose work I loved. And I would always like ask them and be like, hey, what gear are you using? Or like, where was that? And I'll ask him like, hey, how did you learn this? Or where did you learn this? And you'll find quite a lot of the time, I don't think I've ever actually had anyone say, no, I don't like, I don't want to share. Because I think we're in an environment where people are so open to teach other people as to how they did things. And so that's such a very healthy attitude to have. And I would encourage anyone who wants to get into kind of the creative world and wants to explore their own creativity, just find find a buddy, someone whose work you like, even if it's on Instagram and you haven't met them before. Just send them a quick message and be like, hey, I really love your work. Do you have any advice for someone who's starting out? Or like, what do you think I should do to improve my creativity and things like that? And just get out and actually do stuff. I think that's the most important things. Like, it's good to have mentors. It's good to have people whose work you admire and you like, but try to recreate some of the stuff you see. But then once you've been able to do it, figure out what you like. Because that I think is the most important thing, as finding your voice and finding your style. I think it took me 7+ years before I found a style and a look that worked for my images.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time, I was still trying to figure out and learn, like, oh, this lens does this, and oh, lighting is the most incredible thing, not lenses. Like, it started with cameras. Like, I was like, oh, this camera has...
Gotta have the best gear.
Yeah.
Then everything will be fine if I can only have the best gear.
the best camera. And then once I had, like, a pretty good camera, I'd be like, oh, the camera's good. But the reason my pictures aren't better is because I need better lenses. So I spend a lot of money on lenses. And then I learn about lighting and what difference lighting really makes. And I'm like, okay, I need to really invest in lighting. And so I did. And then each step starts to kind of make you realize and go, oh, actually, all of these elements are important. They're useful, but they're not the most important thing. And I would 100% take a photograph or a film that's shot on some crappy camera, but has really engaging story, like that, or catches you. Yeah. Like, I've seen pictures that were shot on like point and shoot cameras, disposable cameras, that look stunning, and you don't care about like the ISO or the fact that you don't have great dynamic range. Like, that doesn't matter when you're looking at an image that resonates with you, or that makes you feel a certain way, versus one that, like, it's crystal clear, it's perfectly lit, but the subject is sitting like this, and there's no or there's no emotion, or there isn't content that you as a human being relate to or somehow feel a certain way about. But yeah.
So when you start, I'm fascinated by your ability to create a story when there isn't one. I'll ask you more about that.
Sure.
What do you look for? I mean, I know you try things out and so on, but is there something that you're keeping an eye for? Like, how does that process work in your mind? Do you like have aha moments, or is it kind of slow and gradual?
For me, it's gradual. Like, it's rare that I like look around and see a story. Like, I've met people who do, and I've worked with people who do, and I'm very jealous of them because, like, it's almost like a magical gift that they have. For me, usually, it happens when I hear sound or music. And this is something I'm realizing more and more recently. Because previously, I would just like go and shoot a ton of things, just throw them in the timeline in Final Cut if I'm editing video, and then I will like start listening to some tracks, and suddenly like I'll hear something, but the process has already started going, and then I'll remember the clips that I've put into the timeline and start rearranging them based on the music and how that feels. Yeah. So music has been one of the most emotive things that I've had when it comes to storytelling, and so that's the biggest thing that I go to, right? Is I listen to how the music flows, and if it makes me feel a certain way, I know that it's going to have that type of an effect on the audience because I'm familiar with the footage. Yeah. Because I've started playing with it in the timeline, because I've just started throwing it around and looking at what I have. I kind of realize and go, oh, like this bit in the music will make someone feel quite excited, or like I want it to build, or I want people to feel a certain way. And I guess like that's the key thing. Yeah. The whole way through.
Figuring out how you want people to feel.
Yeah, because that's the most important. And one thing I always do is before I'm anywhere near like the finished of an edit, I'll grab 2 or 3 people that I trust the opinions of, and I'll have them sit and watch it. And I'll watch them while they watch it, because I want to see their reaction when it gets to a certain point. Yeah. And if I get nothing, then I know I need to change some things. Okay. But if I get reactions that I'm looking for, or I'm surprised by a reaction, I'll kind of play to it more, or I'll try and revisit the area to see how I can streamline it. And so music is one of the most important things, but for me, it's always been around like how I want people to feel. The other thing is also making the story as succinct and clear as possible. If it's an image, there shouldn't be anything on the frame that distracts you from the content. And so when I'm taking pictures, as an example, usually usually one of the lenses that I use, the 135mm f2 from Canon, which is an incredible lens, that I call it my storytelling lens because it allows me to just blur out everything
out.
and just focus just on the thing that I want to get my viewers to pay attention to. And when I first started, I'd just like photograph anything that I thought was cool. Now I look around. Like I have the camera by my side, usually like on my right because I'm right-handed, and I'll look around for a bit, and then if I see something that I know is about to unfold, I'll hold the camera up and I'll wait. And when I think it's about to happen, then I'll shoot. And so sometimes I'll sit and wait in a specific area. Like if I see a setting that looks really nice and could work well, but I'm just waiting for like the right person to walk through. And this is when I'm doing a lot of like street photography stuff. Other times when I'm shooting stuff that's editorial, what I'll do is I'll try and get to know the person, and I'll set up the lighting, I'll set up everything and the way that I want it, and then I'll just talk to them. And I'll play some music, and I just want to really get to know the person, and I'll say or do things to get a reaction out of them.
Yeah.
And that becomes the story, right? Is when you see the image, you see a bit of their personality come out, because we're not trying to go for like a super clean, pristine image. I kind of like the ones that are a little rough around the edges and things that aren't expected by the person, because I think they're going into the shoot thinking like they're going to be well lit and they're going to be in a very stoic kind of pose. Which if that's exactly what they want, we'll have like one or two of those images that they can take.
Yeah.
But the ones that I think most people value and that I value is ones that have a story. Like when you look at the person, they're smiling or they're reacting to something. And so that's my approach to storytelling from nothing. Like my go-to is either music when I'm editing video, or trying to get a reaction out of the person and create something that's real in the moment when taking stills.
I remember a few years ago you started learning how to sing and play the guitar. Was that right about the time when you thought music is important? Was there like a,
Well, that actually, me and music go back a while. That sounds weird to say. But like, I really started to discover a love and passion for singing and playing. Well, the guitar came first. So when I was in school, me and a small group of friends got involved in the Duke of Edinburgh program, which I don't know if you know much about.
Yeah. I got a friend that actually is one of the, not mentors, but one of the people.
So we got involved with it because it was being offered in our school, and there weren't a lot of people that took it up, but we did. And we had to pick a skill, I think it was, that we had to learn and develop. And music was one of them. And so the school provided a pretty crappy classic guitar. At the time, I thought it was incredible. And there was 5 of us who had one guitar teacher that came in to teach all of us, and we had 3 lessons with him. Okay. Before the school ran out of the budget. But they kind of forgot about the guitars because we weren't officially given them.
Okay.
We were given them to use to practice and to learn the skills, and the school was going to use them.
Got left there.
Well, they forgot about it, and we had to take them home to practice. And we just never took them back, and nobody asked a question about them ever again. So we kept them. And out of all my friends, I was the only one that kept it up. Because I would practice every day, and I'd spend, like 20 minutes trying to get the chords right and trying to play. And I didn't play properly, like I didn't have lessons, so I was just trying to figure things out. And so I kept that up. And then when I got to college, I had to do the college course that I wanted to do was mainly just drama, because I was like, I'm an actor. I'm only going to do acting. But the course, the college was really great, and the course was performing arts.
Right.
So I had to do music. I had, from a singing perspective, I had to do dance. I had to do drama, and I had to do all 3 together in like a musical or something. Yeah. And I was like, ugh, dance. I don't want to do this. But after a little bit of convincing from my family members and some friends. They were like, I think you should really do it. I was like, all right, fine. I went to it. It's one of the best things I ever did, because in the singing side of things, I had this incredible teacher who saw some potential in me. She was like, okay, let's spend some time getting you to try out some music. Because the first part of this first semester, we did like a combined performance. So the musical side of things, we did the Beatles songs. We had to devise a play. We had to do a musical that they put on, which I think was Miss Saigon. And for those, like, I really struggled with the singing. But my teacher was like, I know there's something in there. And so she suggested that I do take on an extracurricular course.
Okay.
So we did Oklahoma. And she spent some time with me with the songs that I had to sing as a solo.
Yeah.
And I'd never really sang anything solo before. And it turns out, like, old 1930s, 1920s musicals sounded great for me.
Okay.
And so with a lot of her help, I performed that. And then she was like, I think you should definitely do music for your... Because you get to choose on your second term whether you're going to do music or dance.
Right.
And she was like, I think you should do music. So music, dance, or there was a different one, performing arts. I can't remember. But I chose music and dance for that, which, to my surprise, wasn't the two things that I wanted to do. And so with this music, we had to do Gershwin. And I don't know if you know much about Gershwin. So, like, you know,
the name rings the bell, but I have no idea.
Yeah, George and Ira Gershwin. So you'll know some of the songs, like They All Laughed. They all laughed at Christopher Columbus when he said the world was round.
Okay,
no?
not familiar,
okay. But you'll recognize some of the songs. Like, their songs are everywhere in films.
Okay.
So I used to love a lot of those songs, but I didn't know that they were Gershwin songs. And so when my teacher was like, "This is what we're going to be doing," I was like, oh, this is incredible. And it turns out that I ended up getting an A out of music, which was a huge surprise for me. So that's kind of where my passion for music and singing and guitar kind of
from
came
those, I think it was YouTube videos or Facebook videos you put up. I almost got the impression that you hadn't done it before.
No.
Not because it wasn't good. In fact, maybe that's why it seemed better than it should have been. But the way you were talking about it, it seemed like you were starting it.
Well, because for me, I never, although I had like this education around music, I never had formal musical training.
Right.
So I've built up some really bad habits. Like my timing is very questionable. One of my friends describes it as abstract timing, which is a very interesting way of putting it. He's not wrong. But
time is a concept.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But for me, it's always been a thing that I've just enjoyed doing, but it's not something that I'm very confident doing publicly a lot. Which sounds strange considering like I've performed in musicals and things like that, but I've never done it as like a solo artist or like it's me singing or it's me doing this, because it's just a thing that I enjoy doing. Like when I'm cooking, when I'm like hoovering, then I'll sing at home, and to me that's normal. So whenever like I post stuff on social media, I'm always like but I know like some of my friends really like it and enjoy it, and they encourage me to do so. So that's kind of where that started, but now you know.
Excellent. Storytelling wise, what are the most impactful or important stories, in the sense of ones that taught you something really important, like that made you who you are, or has made you a better person, something that you, like landmarks?
Oh, that's such a tough question.
It doesn't even have to be the best one, but like think whatever comes to mind. Like, is there one?
For me, it's movies, right? Like a lot of my childhood was surrounded by films. So some of the most memorable ones are like Back to the Future, of course, incredible movie. And I loved films, and I loved stories that were so different from the real world, or what we thought was what we're used to.
Yeah. And
so Back to the Future was, for me, one of those magical transformational movies. Back to the Future, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, another very incredible story of like a family who have these different dynamics going on, but at the same time there's this like really cool technology that the dad is working on that has this incredible potential, but accidentally, you know, ends up shrinking his kids, and they see the world around them in a completely different light.
Was that the lesson?
Well, that was the thing, right? So I loved stories that started off in reality, but then the characters go through this journey into this like fantastical land or fantastical world. So like Jurassic Park, where the very beginnings are feasible. Like you're like, this could be me, right? This could be a world that I experience around me, and then all of a sudden dinosaurs come out, right? So for me, when it comes to stories that have really helped and nurture me, films definitely, so some of the films that I mentioned, and then in my teenage years, music. I listened to a lot of Ella Fitzgerald, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, Louis Armstrong, Ray Charles. So all of Aretha Franklin, all of these different voices were telling these incredible stories in 3 minutes or less, right? Because when you think about films, they take time. They're long. You see the journey the character goes through, but you're invested. And so the shorter the time that you have, the much more clear and impactful your message needs to be. And I think music had that way for me. And so hearing like this heartache that these singers are putting out, and especially Sam Cooke, who, you know, in his music, in his lyrics, you can imagine it. Like, for example, have you heard Frankie and Johnny by Sam Cooke?
No.
Check it out.
All right, we'll have to check it out.
It's a masterclass in storytelling in music, because he talks about like this character of Frankie and Johnny who are in love, and Frankie's doing everything for Johnny. She's buying him clothes, cars, and then she finds out that he's cheating on her, and she, spoiler alert, she kills him. But as she shoots him, he tells her, well, I was actually telling her about you. And so there's this like beautiful narrative in it. And so films and music have been the most impactful things to me when it comes to storytelling. And I think now I'm starting to look at like still images, which sounds very weird considering.
No, but there's so much that can happen. Right?
Yeah.
Like with the talking about the music, to me there are some singers that are technically perfect, but they're not giving me anything.
100%.
I remember that there's in the Sopranos they had some nice music. It was Sopranos was like the first proper TV show, modern TV show. Yeah. And they often had interesting music. And one of them was a very old-fashioned Italian lullaby, which I think they must have gotten like a vinyl recording of, because you can hear like. Yeah. And I just remember like watching the TV show. I thought that's kind of cool. Like I'll download it off Apple Music or iTunes or whatever. Yeah. And I got it, and I was listening to it, and I just heard in this woman's voice. It must have been recorded in the 30s, 40s, something like that. Not just her like emotion, but the emotion of like generations of women that are trying to send this fucking baby to sleep. I need, you can feel that, because it's being carried over. They learned it from their mom and their mom and their mom, and you kind of felt that. Yeah. Like, please sleep.
Yeah. the biggest thing I'd say, like with things like that, I think creativity, especially when it comes to like filmmaking, photography, music, is really about imprinting emotion, right? So you're taking feelings or emotion that you have or experiences that you have and imprinting them down for another human being to feel and experience, which is, you know, a pretty tall order, right? Because we're very much used to feeling and experiencing things in person or from the other person. So trying to nail down and communicate emotion in a different medium is quite a challenge. And so I think you have to think about exactly how you want people to feel, and you have to try and communicate that. And so I think lullabies and things like that we experience and hear growing up are very challenging to get right, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that was like an incredible experience.
But it was just, and I started paying attention more to singers that are able to, or like Adele. You can feel her heartbreak in her songs. Like, I was able to understand how she felt in the moment that the thing that she's telling me about happened.
That is
singers like that.
That is exceptional storytelling like at the core. Like, and I think that takes time and vulnerability, right? I think a lot of people, and myself included in a lot of times, feel like you've got to learn the technical side of things. Like, what's the what's the right scale to learn to make the song sound great, or what's like what ISO setting should I be using like for my films to make them look as clean and nice as possible. I think you've got to spend the time getting familiar with that in play, and that's why that's important, because once you've done that, then when it comes to expressing what you want, you aren't thinking about those technical elements. You're just doing it. And it's like language, right? You've got to learn the alphabet, right? And
A like apple, B like
exactly. Like, because if you're trying to express something but you don't know the alphabet, it's quite challenging, right? It's really challenging to think of what letters you need, because that's distracting you away from the emotion.
It's too conscious. It needs to the whole like there's 4 levels, right? When you don't know something and you have no idea that you don't know it.
There's unconscious incompetent. There's conscious incompetent. Conscious competent. Unconscious competent. And
that's where you need to always end up with not subconscious or unconscious competence. Because that's where the magic happens. Because that's where like the conscious mind only has a limited amount of bandwidth. It can do some interesting things. And it talks to you all the time and tells you how great you are, or sometimes it tells you how bad you are. But because it has a voice, you give it a lot of importance. But all the good stuff is coming from the part that's kind of the man behind the curtain. And you gotta feed that man lots of information, lots of tools.
I totally agree, and I think this all comes back to exactly what you said about play, right? You need to spend the time, and like you'll hear people say, oh, you'll need to spend 10,000 hours in order to become incredible at something. It's like, yes and no, but you spend...
Gotta be the right kind of hours.
Yeah, well, it depends on what you're doing, right? But the most time you spend proactively playing in order to do something different each time, the more you learn. And the more instinctive certain things become. So like, for example, when you walk into a room, if you've used your lenses enough, when you walk into a room, you'll know exactly what field of view you're going to have from each area before you even take out the camera, right? So because your eye is trained to seeing those same...
and you don't even know you're doing it.
Well, that's the thing, right?
You like put on a lens and you'd be like, oh, that worked out perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think in order to focus on the story, which unfortunately comes later down in practice, you need to get comfortable with the tools, and you need to do things so much that you're not even thinking about those things. You're just saying, okay, this is what I want to focus on. I'll just need to do these things and set them up, and because you don't have to worry about that. I mean, if you're successful enough at some point, you'll have other people to worry about those things, and you can focus on the story. But if you're just starting out, or you're a one-person band, you have to spend that time.
And I mean, I've been trying to get a crew for things for a long time, because I want to focus on the part that I'm interested in most. But having the lack of that is important, I think, because now I'd be able to tell them if they're doing something that is not going to get me the result that I want. Whereas in the past, I've had to rely on someone who I thought was really, really good at what they did and hope that meant they would give me what I wanted.
Communication. Communication is important. But I think you're right in the sense, like, you wanna get to a point where you can work with people that you're aligned with, and you can say, hey, this is what I need, and I need you to have it at these specific settings and just trust that they're going to deliver it, rather than that they know how to figure out the thing that you need. Because I think there's a moment where you're psychically thinking like, oh, they know this. And they're like, oh, this is what he wants. But really in the middle, you haven't met.
I think that's why some of the best directors or, people like that, basically you build that little team that they stick with, that they can trust each other to, like you learn from each other what's possible, push each other's boundaries, but there's like a certain level of loyalty and faith in what they can do, so that you're all focusing on doing your job really well, as opposed to trying to see if anyone else is doing there badly.
Well, I have a friend that I've worked with for a very long time, and when we work on video projects, he's the sound guy. And I know that if there's a thing I want or the thing I need fixed with sound, I'm like, hey, can you do this? And he's like, yeah, of course. But usually he's the one who challenges me with stuff. And I don't realize it, but I challenge him with stuff sometimes. He tells me I do. I don't think I do, but apparently I do. But I know how his mind works when it comes to like sound, because I know he wants everything to be like pristine and clear and perfect, or he just says, what do you want me to fix? And send me the thing. And I'm like, cool, if I send you this like long video, does that work? He's like, yes, just send that to me. And so it's good to know that you have people that you can have that kind of relationship with, but that takes time to build, right? Play helps to build that.
What I've been trying to focus on is more trying to identify people that have the best way I hate corporate speak, but that have the right values. So one of the most important ones that I think I watch out for in the companies I like to support, in the people I like to work with, is this desire to do a really good job at all times. Is this good? Is it better than the last time I did it? Have I delivered more than the person asked me? As a point of pride, this kind of drive to do that is something I resonate with in the companies. That's why, I switched to Apple products in 2006. I would never buy a Windows machine anymore. I wouldn't. It's because, they'll make mistakes as well, but one of their core values is, are we doing the best that we can? Is it better than last time? Are we giving people the best tool possible? And the cameras I use are from a similar company in terms of, they're trying to give you things that, for the price that you're buying them at, give you as good as possible the tool, so that you can focus on playing. You don't have to worry about the camera, like, where's that fucking setting?
Yeah, absolutely. I love people who obsess. It sounds really weird and douchey, but I don't do it for the money. Most of the projects that I take on, and some of the best work that I've done has been favors that I've wanted to do for friends. Because the people who are like singers or musicians or artists whose work I love, and I can see that they're not getting enough enough support from their viewers or people, because they're not getting the exposure.
You see something special and you want to try to bring that out.
And so what I do is I'll offer them and I'll say, hey, do you want to go shoot? And that's kind of beneficial for me as well, because one, I use that time for play, because they're not a client that I have the pressure of I have to deliver to exactly what they want. To them, they're getting free images, right? To me, I'm getting to experiment with someone really cool, and I really want to help them and support them. And so I do it because I want to play and create some really cool things, but at the same time, I don't want to just take the images and just be like, hey, here you go, right? I will obsess over those images. I'll try and make sure hey, if there's a thing in the background that shouldn't be there, I'll remove it. I'll spend maybe an hour or two just going through the images and clearing out anything that is unnecessary that drags away focus from the person. So I love people that obsess over these little things, and I know a couple of people that I work with who do that for whatever client work that they have or whatever it is that they invest their time in when it comes to their creativity. And so having that value, I think is so incredibly important and rare. And I think when you come across those people, you're like, you come over here.
You do. Especially, I mean, I love that you're doing it for friends that you see something special in, because it is so much easier when it's when you have a nice block of marble, as opposed to trying to put the same pride and obsession in making a sculpture out of a little piece of poop. When you do a corporate client for the money and like they didn't plan, they might be paying you well, but they don't even give a shit about the video that they're creating. So why should you? But you're trying to make it care.
Yeah.
It's so much harder. But if you have people that you're like, this person's special, they should be famous, or they should be known for what they do, let me help them. It's so easy to do a good job.
Yeah. I guess like the challenge is, as an artist, usually you're quite poor, right? Or whatever money you have, you spend on gear, right? I've been guilty of that, and I'm still guilty of that. But you have these like visions of these incredible stories you want to tell, or like this beautiful thing that you want to make, and usually the client is like, none of that. Like, I just want this to be good for my audience, and I need this to work. And the thing is, at the end of the day, they're your client, right? They're paying you to do a job, right? So I think you need to do that. But at the same time, I think the battle comes in when you try to shoehorn like your creativity into the vision that the client has. So that's kind of a tough area to work, because everyone has their own different ways of doing it. Some people will do that and their client will end up liking it, and some don't. So for me, my rule has always been, I try to be as clear as possible with whatever my client wants, and I'll deliver that to them. And I'll treat it like a product that I'm delivering, and as long as they're happy with the standard, then I'll do that.
I always try to give my best. And like, it's only hard when they're not giving their best.
Yeah.
If they care, even if their vision is wrong or weird, or you have to like fix it somehow, cool. I can deal with that. It's frustrating, but I can deal with that. But when they're like, you're doing a job maybe for half the price, and they said like, you only booked one day, are you sure you can deliver in time? Yeah, no problem. They turn up, they don't know their lines. And you're like, you don't care about what you do, but I do. But
I think that's a conversation that you have with your client, and let them know, like, hey, look, you're paying me for this time, and so if you want to maximize that time and you want to get the most out of it, then this is something you want to prepare for. And so if you're not happy with the results that we've delivered, I'm happy to film again, but that's going to cost the same as what I've charged you for this time, because I have to think about my time, right? And so I think that's where the tough conversations can happen, because clients sometimes have a huge expectation that they're going to have, they're going to be great on camera, and they've never been on camera before. And so I think the earlier you have those conversations of what it's going to look like, and try and find out, what their experience is, then you can start to bring in help for them. Like, for example, one thing that I've done with another friend of mine is, like, he's also an actor, but he also runs drama courses. Okay, cool. Like, I haven't been acting for nearly a very long time, nearly a decade now. So I don't even call myself an actor anymore.
We'll fix that.
But I know enough people that are still in the business, that are acting regularly, that are running courses, that I can reach out to and be like, hey, look, I've got a client that's going to do some filming, but hadn't much experience on camera before. Can you come in and do some coaching with them before we film, just to get them a bit more comfortable, just to get them to loosen up a bit, because so many people like get quite rigid on camera, and so it's quite nice to get them to relax. So that's a thing that I think can help quite a lot. But at the same time, I think, for me, I look at those gigs as money that's going to help me do the things that I love. Yeah. Right. So I will do those things, and I may not think they're the most creative, the most like expressive things, but it works for the client, and it gets me income that I can use for things that I want to be very artsy and creative with. So
I've tried to do that as well. It's been this year's. However, has pushed me to kind of turn it on its head, rather than finding people that I can help so that then I can do my thing. I'm gonna do my thing, and then if to keep it going, I'll find people that like to help.
Yeah.
Just sort of swapping the priority around, because built a business for 2-3 years, it was gone in the blink of an eye. And I hadn't even really started to do the things I cared about.
Yeah.
I can't keep doing it this way.
I think we're in a incredible time, because like before the last 5-6 years, you had to have spent a lot of time in the industry, you had to have built a lot of connections, and you had to have like done a lot of stuff before you start to get recognition, before you start to be like a successful creative. But with YouTube coming out, not coming out, but like YouTube being this, don't worry, I was worried I was going to do that.
On camera.
Yeah, it's fine. You can cut 4K. This bit out. Yeah. One of the things that I think has been incredible for the last 5 to 10 years is the evolution of YouTube.
Yeah.
Because that has let people just do their thing, like you said. Like, it gave people a platform to be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to create things and I'm going to put them out there. If people like it, they like it.
Great.
If they don't, they don't. And I think that's so incredible. And that's something that I keep telling myself that I'm going to start to do. But I still have this old mindset of like, oh, I need to go out and I need to build credibility, and I need to, start making my own films, and I need to do all of these things in the right way. And that's something that I'm trying to remind myself to break. And so I think it's such an important time for people who have a vision of a thing that they want to do. Just start, just do it, because right now you have so many different options and so many things that make it easier to make that possible. And you don't have to spend, like I said, like £15,000 on camera gear or going to film school. You can get a £50 light from Amazon that's going to do pretty well if you aim it at a wall. You can set up your phone, which nowadays shoots in 4K at 24 frames per second, and some of them even have a LUT that you can apply using Filmmaker Pro. So there's so much available resources, and you can learn things from people much easier now, rather than having to get that like tribal knowledge from experienced DPs and experienced photographers. So I think it's an incredible time, and although it's quite challenging for a lot of people, who've put in that work, and COVID has suddenly said, "Nah, stop,
reset." Yeah,
on everything. I think we're at a point where we're seeing a lot of different perspectives, and we're seeing a lot of different creativity coming out from parts of the world that we never used to before.
During difficult times.
Innovation.
Combination of difficult times and the level of technology that means distribution is easy now. It's going to be an interesting time next 10 years, I think.
But also, I think if you think back at it, right, it's some of the best inventions come out of. I think the phrase is like, the mother of invention is necessity, right, or something along those lines. And so when you have to have an income, when you have to get something coming in, but you're not able to go out the house to do it, you have to think of a way to make it happen, and you have to do it, right?
Definitely.
And also, like for me, there's been times when I've been on a shoot and the battery on a camera has gone down, and thank you. You're trying to encourage me to get drunk.
Yeah, of course. It's part of the show.
Well, that I like. Great show. But yeah, so battery on a camera has gone down and we don't have a charger. So what do? Like, you have to run to the closest shop, buy AA's and some sort of an adapter and make it work, right? So you make that work, but then you realize, that's a backup plan I should have for the next time. And so in the moment, you have to think about, hey, how do I make this work? I think a lot of people give up too easily. And I've had that many a time before where I just like, this isn't going to work. And then someone comes up with an idea and I'm like, why didn't I have that idea? Because I was too easy to kind of go, no, this isn't going to work. And so I've trained myself over years to kind of be like, okay, there's always a way if you're determined enough, if you're passionate enough, and you're creative enough and resourceful enough. So I think having a positive attitude and trying to encourage yourself to find a solution to a problem or to a thing that becomes a barrier in your way is a way that you can overcome these things and surprise yourself of what you're capable of. Because I don't think you're I don't think we're aware of how much creativity we have until we're in a situation where we have to be creative.
I don't think we're taught what creativity is. Like, there's this. I always thought there was this thing that would just hit you. From the way people described it, I thought I didn't have it. I didn't realize that it takes practice. It takes play. Like you're not gonna get it if you just sit 40 years there, kind of waiting for it to hit you. It's not like that.
I think it's also based on old thinking, because I think people used to describe creative people and non-creatives, right? And I know I use the phrase like people who are creative, and I'm trying to stop myself from using that phrase, because I think everyone is creative, right? It's a skill like anything. And it really saddens me when I see schools not focusing on that these days, because I think creativity helps solve so many problems, and it allows you to make connections in your brain that you sometimes may not. So because creativity is quite messy, and so it allows you to kind of break the rules and go, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we experiment with this? Or why don't you use this color, and why don't we use this shape, or whatever it is that you're working on?
Problem solving, critical thinking, creative. Most schooling systems are designed to give you a good 18th century factory worker. Free thinking and thinking outside the box, not rewarded very heavily in most schools.
And I think that needs to change. And I don't know if you've watched the TED Talk by Sir, I think it's Ken Robinson, about, so he recently passed away, and he had some of the most incredible TED Talks around education.
Okay.
And he talks about how schools are kind of killing education, and how we need to bring that to be like the center of education, rather than it being a thing that you have an hour or two about. And one of the quotes he talks about is Picasso, who mentioned that everyone is born creative. The challenge is to stay creative as we grow up.
Get trained out of it.
Yeah, because
you get punished every time you're creative.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's one of the things that we need to have a huge focus on, because it allows you to make so many different connections that you wouldn't normally. Because if you spend some time just experimenting with a color, and you have a presentation to make, which colors make people feel a certain way, because you spent time playing with them, and there's a color that you really like, and you use that as part of your presentation, and immediately people tend to have a reaction to it, whether that's positive, negative. It's something that's quite small, but can have a pretty big impact, right? Or you listen to music, or you're playing some chords here and there that you're experimenting with, and you're working with someone who's making a film, and they play a short part of it for you, and you're like, those chords that I played could work really well in this element. And so you start making these connections, and before you know it, you have a much better experience at the end of whatever it is that you're making and creating. So I think creativity is such an important and vital element for kids. And
I think
adults.
it's got to start with the parents, and it's hard because being weird or being different is punished with shame, and it's hard, especially if your kid's different in a way that's different from the way you were different. You might try to bring them back to the right way, whatever that might be in your head, and then schooling adds on top of that.
And I think that's changing for the better now, because of things like YouTube, because of the internet, right? Because before, everyone had to conform to a norm based on
and there's 50 people.
Yeah, exactly.
Now a kid in the middle of Africa can load up YouTube on their phone and see that there are people doing things completely different.
Yeah, and vice versa, right? There's people who are in America, in New York, in like London, like wherever you are in the world, you can see someone across the other side of the planet who's
thinking differently,
Yeah.
eating differently, talking differently.
I've learned so much from TikTok. like, I tried to not spend a lot of time on TikTok, but like I see the way that people fold things, and I'm like, I'm in my 30s and I've spent all this time, and I didn't realize you could fold like plastic bags this way to make them like nice and neat, and so I think as a society we're learning, and the internet is changing the way in which we connect and absorb things, because I think before you had to do a lot of searching and hunting to learn new things and things that were different, and when you showed them to everyone around you, people who also hadn't seen that thing would be like, what are you doing? You're strange, you're weird, stay away.
And you had no way of knowing that it wasn't just you. Now, like, I can guarantee that you can pick up any weird hobby. Like, you can create a new hobby that doesn't exist, and yet then you go on Google, it's like, okay, no one's ever thought of this. And you find like a community of like 100 people
exactly.
that are having a convention somewhere.
Exactly.
So basically the internet's made it so no one's alone anymore.
Yeah.
Like, really, like, and you can find other people, find the others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's also a double-edged sword, because I think as much as the internet connects people that are separated, it also doesn't. Yeah. Because it also gives you the impression.
Only goes so far. Yeah, you think you're having
connected.
a social experience, but it's not real.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so, because I think I think the perfect example of that is now. Like, because I think you forget just how valuable human contact really is. Because you feel like, oh, I'll talk to them on FaceTime, or I'll WebEx them this afternoon. But really, are you meeting them? Are you, socializing? Are you able to look in their eyes and like gauge their tone, or like
share a joke?
Yeah.
When someone else does something weird and you're like having a drink at the pub and you both see it and you kind of look at each other.
Exactly.
You can't have that remotely.
Exactly. Those human elements, those unexpected things that you experience together. Yeah. I think those are also important. But I do think it's an incredible time where you could feel isolated in a small town where there's no one like you, and then you go online and there's like 50 million people that are like you, and you're like, like, I found my tribe. Yeah. So I think we're at an incredible time.
Oh, for sure. What are the stories you want to tell? Like, if I'd won the Euro Millions yesterday, which I won like £6.
Great.
And I was like,
congratulations.
Min, you don't have to work anymore. I'm going to fund your project.
Yes.
What are the stories you want to tell?
See, that's the thing that I've been asking myself so much recently. Like, when I was, I think, 29, 28, there was a dream that I had of like this scene that still haunts me to today, and I want to make that film. I want to make that story. And the story is like, I think, because I've always been, as a kid, obsessed with like stories and films that were to do with things in space, like, or with different alien races and things like that. And the more I grew up, the more I started to learn about like solar systems and like what we've been doing as a species, and especially with like the Voyager craft being sent out with like all the recordings and things like that. And one of the things that I've always wondered, and again I've started to learn about, I don't know if you've seen Kurzgesagt on YouTube. Kurzgesagt. I may be pronouncing it wrong, but it's a YouTube channel that explains things. Right? That shows like really complex ideas and breaks them down in these beautiful animated graphics. And one of the things that they explained was about the Fermi Paradox, which I'm sure you've heard of. And so like that obsession with like wondering what's out there and the vastness of space, and my love for films and like all these incredible stories, I think culminated to having this like dream that I had. And in that dream was when I woke up, I remember feeling like, hey, what would happen if these recordings that we send out into space, they are intercepted by another alien species, right? And there's this like interstellar battle thing going on between them, and we're unaware of it because we're on the outer edges of it. And so what happens when Earth is caught in the middle of that. And what happens to humanity when you are powerless? You are nowhere near the ability of these different species that have their own battles, but you exist in the middle of it, and so you're caught in the crossfires. And so the scene that I remember from my dream was there was these two guys playing basketball on a court, and there's a bunch of people screaming and happy and cheering around them, and all of a sudden one of the guys is like who's bouncing the ball, like the ball starts to drop and off his hand, and his friend is trying to figure out like what's going on, and everyone's looking towards him, and as he turns around there's this orb that appears, encapsulates him and shoots up into the sky, and as everyone looks up there's thousands of these orbs coming down. And so the idea is it's kind of like a last effort to try and save the human species before it's wiped out by this battle that's going on. So that was just like a dream that I woke up from, but that scene just stuck with me and I couldn't forget it. And most dreams, when I wake up, within 10-15 minutes, like I forget what's happening.
Yeah. You gotta write them down. It's good that it stuck with you.
Yeah.
And you know that Game of Thrones started with a scene? Just one scene?
Mm.
The
No,
one,
I didn't.
I'm pretty sure, the one, the beheading in the snow, I think it was.
I didn't know that.
Like George wrote that and just wrote it separately.
Yeah.
And just sat there on its own for a while until he was able to kind of craft the rest of it. But it's interesting because I think it's happened to many great works where the person that wrote them or created them had one piece of it, just one little piece, but it was so detailed that then creating the rest out of it was easy.
Yeah, well, this is the thing that stuck with me, because that scene, I can remember it so clearly, even today. And so I've started to build like little elements as to why that happened. Like, where did that orb come from, and what species is looking after that, or like created that, and why are they trying to save the human race? What's the point? Like, these are the questions that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. But the idea is, what happens when there are 10,000 humans left of the entire human species, right? And how do you communicate when some of them don't speak your same language? You don't have the same tools that you had. The world that you took for granted is gone from a minute. And the thing the image that I had was, as the person's going up into whatever ships or thing that they've been taken into, it's made of glass. The front part of it is see-through, so they can see what's happening. They can see the battle that's taking place that they were unaware of 10 minutes ago. Yeah. And they can see the Earth about to be destroyed. And so what happens when you have 10,000 humans who have just witnessed one of the most horrific things you can ever imagine as a species? Yeah. And now you're part of an endangered species, and you have to somehow figure out like what life becomes. Yeah. So that's a question I'm still trying to answer. Okay. So that's a story that I really want to tell.
I'd love to help out. That sounds really cool.
I need to write it first.
Yeah, but if you want to bounce ideas, I love sci-fi is what maybe even more than fantasy, but both of them have been really strong. Like I was always drawn to those. Once again, fantastical.
Yeah. Star Wars.
It allows you fun enough to explore. Yeah. Some people go, I only watch real things or serious things. I think some of the most real moments I've ever experienced were in fantasy or science fiction. Mm-hmm. Because it allows you to realize that some of the more basic emotions or ideas are timeless and spaceless and whatever. Humans are still going to have the same jealousy or greed in the future and in the past, whether there's dragons or, aliens. Mm-hmm. It's really powerful.
The best sci-fi films and TV series, the science fiction part of it, if you take that out completely, it would still be an incredible film. Yeah. It'll still be an incredible story, because that's just the scene. That's just painting the world and making you see things through a different lens. But the most important thing is how you feel, right? How you make your audience feel. And so, for example, Star Wars, right? When, spoiler alert, when you find out that Vader is Luke's father.
I think
Yeah.
if you don't know by now.
Seen it, well, like a friend of mine just admitted that she'd seen it for the first time yesterday. Like she'd seen the others, but not the middle one. I was like, what? But yeah, so if you kind of take these fantastical elements out of it, then you still feel and realize that human connection. And so, for example, using Star Wars as an example, it's really about this person's struggle to discover who they really are, especially
it's the hero's journey.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, and also this turmoil of realizing, my family member is responsible for genocide.
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing is things I think not to that scale. But these are things that people experience. Like they have a family member that may be racist or that may be sexist or.
When you learn that, let's say your father is bad, you try to redeem him.
Yeah.
Or do you
how do you
break contact? Like what do you do? Like that's an interesting choice.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and it's about like the best storytellers make you see yourself in the character, right? They see you see part of yourself and kind of go, that could be me. Or like, I've had that.
Yeah.
And so I think those are the most valuable elements in a film and in a storytelling. And I think sci-fi, for me, is a go-to because from the get-go, it makes you feel like you're forgetting the world and the reality, but really, it's showing.
And it's easy to exaggerate something that's maybe not readily apparent in a normal setting, but if humans have been made immortal by technology. What happens to greed and cruelty if the people in power never change? We're seeing the effects of what's happening to America when people that are around like 80 are still senators and they have views that were conservative when they went to power 40 years ago. They're still making decisions now. Imagine a world where that person can be 500. What happens? That's an interesting idea because it's so exaggerated that you realize it right away. You're like, that's not good.
Yeah.
We should really think about that.
Well, a film that a lot of people didn't like, but I loved, was In Time with Justin Timberlake.
Okay.
Which I...
Oh, wait. He's got like a set age thing?
Yeah, so everyone, if I remember correctly, everyone when they're born has a set amount of time.
Yeah, it's a currency, right? Yeah. They use it as currency.
Yeah, so and so you can have people that are 10,000 that have 10,000 years, or people who clock out, which is a great term, who've run out of time, and when they run out of time, they die. And I think the clock is set until they're 21 or 25 or something.
After a certain birthday, because they stay the same age. Yeah, I remember. I watched it.
I thought it was a phenomenal concept.
Yeah, it was a 10 out of 10 concept. The execution was 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I would edge closer to 8. I don't think it was as bad as people made it out to be.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, like
I was
the concept
that could have been better.
Phenomenal. I think it was the Wachowskis that made it.
Okay.
Love their stuff. Another film of the Wachowskis that everyone hated, but I loved, was Cloud Atlas.
I haven't seen it.
Okay. Some of the makeup work in it, I think, was questionable. I'm not I'm not a makeup artist, so I can't really criticize it that much. But I think that was one of the things that made it not so great for a lot of people to watch, because I think they were like, I know exactly who that is.
So if it takes you out of it, I guess.
Yeah, it really removes you out of it. I think that was a really tough thing to try and communicate, because they were using the same actors but in different roles to represent different times, or a reincarnation of that character at a different point in time. But I didn't mind it that much. Like, I actually kind of like that. I didn't quite like the way in which they looked, but the way in which they were represented, and you saw the connections between all of these different elements coming together at the end, I thought was genius. Because for me, like, the two things I love in films is things that are set up quite early, that you're looking at and you kind of go, this is important, but then you forget about it because something important comes along, and then later down the line you see all these elements that you were trying to keep track of but then forget converge at the end. Or when there's a narrator. Like anytime there's a narrator, I'm like, sold. This is gonna be great.
It's so good when threads converge.
Yeah.
And like the reveal or the mystery or whatever it is isn't just like I could have never figured it out. But when it's instead, I should have figured it out. I knew those bits and those bits were important. How did I not see that?
Exactly.
Oh my god. That blows my mind when that happens.
When it blindsides you, like I usually just get up and applaud the filmmakers for that, because
they gave you the tools to know what was going to happen, but you didn't figure it out.
Yeah, my biggest annoyance as a filmmaker is knowing what's going to happen, because there are shots that some filmmakers put in, and again I say some filmmakers, myself 100% included in this, where you give the story away in a close-up, right? So someone picks up the keys, and there's a close-up of them doing that, and subconsciously
you go, "Oh, that's
you
important."
Go, like, most people may ignore that, but like once you start to get into a point where you think about every single frame that's going to be in a film, you're like, why have you spent the time to show me that someone's picking up those keys?
And you don't want to telegraph something too obviously. That one's even not that bad.
Yeah.
I'm talking like the ones I'm talking about are the ones where like two soldiers and one like goes, "Can't wait to see my son when I get back home." And like, "Oh, you're gonna die. You're so fucking dying. In the next 10 minutes, you're gonna die."
Well, I think the correct term for that is like Chekhov's gun.
Yeah.
Right. So if I remember correctly, like if a gun is introduced in Act 1, it has to go off by Act 3. Right. So
fine, but don't be like, "Here's a gun. Look at the gun."
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay, now forget about the gun.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think they've got to do it in such a way that it distracts you from it. The one I just remembered, there is another story that I really want to tell.
Okay.
And this is something that I thought of quite recently, and I remembered because we were talking about like what films that have a narrator, and I wondered like, and this is a story that I'd want to tell if I ever at any point, I don't think it'll happen, but if I ever at any point end up at Disney and Pixar, I'd want to tell this story, which is what happens in the land of narrators. Like, imagine like the narrator is a like a prestige role that you get, like, you know, Monsters Inc.
Yeah.
Like how there's these monsters that they become like top scarers.
And
we have like top narrators, and as a narrator you are responsible for the life of a human being whose life you narrate. So, but then there's this, in the world of narrators, there's like these incredible narrators, and there's this kid who wants to become a narrator, or like is about to become a narrator, and they're narrating the life of a person, and that person becomes aware that their life is being narrated, almost like
the one with
Stranger Than Fiction.
That was such a good movie.
But that was more around like a writer accidentally narrating his life. But
this would be like a thing that happens.
Yeah, this would be a land of narrators. And I want to know, like, I want to see all the different narrators, and some that are like narrating a comedy, and some that are narrating a horror. And
oh god, if people know that they're being narrated, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah,
that's the guy that narrates the Psycho movies.
yeah. But I guess like the goal is like the best narrators don't make their people realize that their life is being narrated.
Okay.
And so I kind of like to see this journey that the person goes on, where the narratee realizes, because of an accident of the narrator, who's their first time narrating someone's life, and they build this relationship. And so I just want to kind of flesh that out and see what happens.
I want to hear more.
I want to write more. I want to think of more.
Yeah.
So.
That got me. That last idea to flesh it out. That reminded me of something I wanted to ask you. How do you feel about storytelling tools like the hero's journey, Dan Harmon's story circle, or Pixar's 22 questions, or whatever it is? Like, how do you feel about those? Do you think it's sort of a reverse engineering of a process that should be natural, or actually it's useful to try and use these structures that we've discovered all good stories tell? But is it? I guess what I'm asking is is it wrong to try and feed a story through it rather than naturally let it get there?
It's quite a hard question because for me, I think those tools are very helpful if you're starting out. Actually, no, let me throw that out the window. I think those tools are very helpful in general. I think you got to look at what it is that you want your audience to experience or what it is you want them to feel. And I think these tools and these structures work really well. And there's a reason that they work really well, right? It's because they have a specific branding or a specific feel or image to them. Like, for example, Pixar films, they have the same feeling that you experience, right? Yeah. They always have you excited at some point. They always have you feeling like super, not related, but like super invested in the character. And then there's a release at the end. But then you've watched films like Saw. The very first Saw was the first film that I think I saw where the villain won, right? And I remember at the end being like, oh my God, I've never experienced this before. And they weren't using any of these structures, but I think it's important to be aware of them. And I think you get to choose whether you think it's right for your story, or whether you're going to go, I think these tools are really great, but I'm going to do the opposite thing, or I'm going to do my way, because I think you can only decide what's right for your character's story, right? Because I think once you know the journey of your character, right? What you want them to experience, you want them to feel, and you know what you want your audience to feel, then I think you can start to decide and fine-tune whether your character has these different elements in their life that they experience, or whether you go, hey, I want to just reflect exactly what I've had in my life.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to be aware of them, and I think everyone who makes their own stories or makes their films, you have nothing to lose from learning them. You have nothing to lose from understanding what makes them work.
Yeah.
And I think you need to do that before you learn to ignore them and make your own decision.
Yeah. It's like learning the basic punches and kicks in a martial art before you create your own move.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's not going to work if you go in going, I'm going to throw away 1,000 years of like Shaolin Kung Fu learning and do my own thing.
Exactly, because there's a reason they work. Yeah. Right? There's a reason why me and you say the phrase Pixar regularly. There's a reason, like, we refer to Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
Because they have a system that has really worked well for them and their way of storytelling. And so the thing is, I think a lot of people look at that and go, oh no, like, that's a structure that works for them and I'm going to do my own thing, without actually having to look at it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to be aware of it. I think it's important to figure out where the value is, because you may take one or two elements from that and one or two elements from Pixar's work and combine it and make your own. Yeah. And that's how, like, creativity really happens, because it's making the links from things that you see value in and putting them together and offering up something new that people haven't experienced or seen. Wow, this is making me burp a lot. It's good cider.
Yeah. Oh, wrong bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, people always think when they say, oh, it's going to be an hour or something like that. Oh, it's so long. How are we going to talk for that time?
Oh, man.
It goes quickly. See, we could keep going for another hour, but I think I should thank you. Should stop the cameras.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Sir,
let's do this again.
I'll have you back on to maybe talk about something else if you're up for it.
I'd be down for that. Man, this is great. I was like, let's do another 4 hours.
Yeah, sure. It's easy to talk with friends about things that they care about, especially if you have a shared interest. Maybe sometimes maybe I won't have like as much knowledge or interest, but it's easy when they like it, if you like them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, dude. My pleasure.